Okay, pleased to say I'm joined in the studio now by Helin Sari Ertem, who's an associate professor at the Istanbul Medeniyet University, professor of international relations. Welcome again, Helin.
Hi.
I'm going to start with let's start aggressively, because that's how European leaders have responded to events today. You know, there were some positives, some negatives, but European leaders have said this isn't good enough. So we've had the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron of France, Donald Tusk of Poland, and also Friedrich Merz of Germany. They were straight onto a phone call with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, so that they could align their response to what they saw as being a very weak showing by Russia. And in fact, Emmanuel Macron has just put out a tweet saying that after that phone call, he said that Russia's just buying time by continuing with war. Do you think that's a fair response?
Well, I think they are correct. And by these kind of moves, they are trying to increase the pressure on the Russian side especially, which was not very much existing today. Because looking at the outcome, the declarations after the meeting, especially from the Ukrainian side, I see that the Ukrainian side is much more ready for a solution, at least for an immediate ceasefire, as they are expecting. But the Russian side is somehow a bit slower than the Ukrainian side. And I guess all these European leaders are underlining their demand from the United States, especially from President Trump, to increase his pressure on Putin, whom he thinks that he has a very good relationship with.
This is the problem, though, isn't it? Because Donald Trump thought he had this relationship that he could use to create a ceasefire, and that is not happening. Do you think that, and there was a gap between the way that European leaders wanted to handle Vladimir Putin and the way Donald Trump wanted to handle him. We've seen Trump's frustration most recently. Do you think that now Trump will come closer to Europe and take a more aggressive approach?
Well, regarding many different issues, what we saw with Trump is ups and downs, lots of ups and downs on the United States part. So I'm expecting a tougher stance from the United States, especially after these demands coming from the European countries. I guess different than many other issues with Russia, Trump started quite softly, and now he's going to increase his pressure. And this is what the world, and especially the European allies, are expecting him to do. Looking at the Russian side and also to the Ukrainian side, and today on the table, what we saw was a lack of trust. The two sides are still suffering from a huge lack of trust, and they don't know whether they were going to really achieve a ceasefire and a permanent peace, sustainable peace. So there are lots of things to do to move on, but at least what I saw after the declarations by the end of the summit is that we started with a negative feeling, then we now have a relatively positive feeling after the Ukrainian and Russian declarations, but that is not the perfect end, of course.
The problem is, what exactly can Donald Trump and the European leaders do? Because there's talk of more sanctions coming. Now, Russia's had more sanctions than anybody in history, I would imagine, and it doesn't seem to be hurting them to the extent that they're changing the way that they operate, the way that they're continuing to fight, and they're continuing to snub lots of invitations to have a serious conversation about a ceasefire. So what can be done to bring Russia to heel, so to speak?
Well, I think here in that position, when and if we see that the European side, the American side are increasing their pressure by applying more sanctions, the specific role goes to the countries like Turkey, who are somehow swinging in between Russia and the United States, which is a positive role because it is a mediation or facilitation role. So the role of the countries, especially like Turkey, would be to do lots of things, at least to make a great effort to persuade Russian side, President Putin, to know that he's losing a lot without a ceasefire, without a permanent peace. So we have to, as the countries who are supporting the idea of having peace between these two countries, they have to tell the Russian side that there is a lot of benefit if he agrees on peace, especially starting with a ceasefire, immediate ceasefire.
Helin, thank you so much. Helin Sari Ertem is an Associate Professor of International Relations at Istanbul Medeniyet University. Appreciate it.